Near-death experiences, or NDEs, of which I've had a few, primarily occurred at a time when NDEs were seldom documented, let alone discussed. It was something I could only share with people who are already spiritually aware, open-minded, or sensitive. Nonetheless, because ignorance was still so common at the time, people would occasionally accuse me of having hallucinations or needing psychiatric assessment. The good news is that in recent years, the NDE has not only been discussed, but it has also been documented and has piqued the curiosity of the media, both broadcast and print. Recent examples include stories in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia, as well as a column in which I appeared. Scientists, physicians, psychologists, clergymen, mystics, and others have all gathered to get a better understanding of the NDE phenomenon. Many people, including myself, have been through it, and we've been called back to teach and share our experiences with others. On the surface, one would question why so many of us were brought back, while others remained on the other side. This is mostly owing to the fact that we wanted to fulfill and complete something significant in our lives, as well as honor a specific duty to assist humanity in eventually realizing that there's no such thing as death. We simply move on, continuing to progress in our path back to the light. People are continuously asking, what happened and how was it? I'll try to explain what happened to me that resulted in one of my NDEs, as well as what I saw on the other side. Everything, including the past and future, is always experienced in the present. In this section, I'll try to describe and relive my experiences on the other side, as well as how they affected me. I'll humbly try to find the perfect words to express the most awe-inspiring experience, which had a deep influence on me and has forever changed my life. The experiment. I was coping with a deadly diagnosis, colon cancer, in my mid-70s, and my life was ebbing away. I was mostly bedridden, but I could occasionally sit up for brief periods of time. As a contemplative, I was always listening and observing, taking everything in and attempting to comprehend the deeper wisdom behind what was occurring to me and where it was all headed. As a result, I became more withdrawn and alienated, as I noticed that everything around me was changing. Colors became more vivid and vibrant, solid substance became more translucent and fluid-like, sound became more clear and acute, and so on. I couldn't understand anything written on a page since it didn't mean anything to me in my altered state of consciousness. It seemed like I was attempting to read and understand a foreign language. For the most part, I had already exited the third dimension. As my awareness expanded to encompass other things, I was entering what I eventually came to call the twilight stage of my life. Everything had changed in this state. I reached a point where my consciousness was already shifting from one domain to another, becoming more aware of other realities in other dimensions. Even while I was still partly cognizant on the physical plane, I was seeing and perceiving things and other creatures interdimensionally. I've now understood that this is what many dying individuals go through, such as those in hospitals, nursing homes, or hospice care. While an observer may believe they're hallucinating or seeing someone or something that isn't actually there. In reality, this is a situation in which one, such as myself, is experiencing other realms while remaining on the physical plane because we are multidimensional beings. I finally went into a coma on Boxing Day, December 26th, and was certified dead on my birthday, February 2nd. I now have 2 natal charts. While others were observing my coma, which lasted more than 5 weeks, I was enjoying a completely different experience. Looking at my body, one would think I was comatose, asleep, with no idea of what was going on, or anything. Nonetheless, I was highly attentive and profoundly aware, because in reality, we never truly sleep, only our bodies do. On one level of consciousness or another, we're always aware and active. The fact that we dream when sleeping indicates that our consciousness is always engaged. Indeed, our bodies require rest in order for us to tap into and experience other elements of our consciousness and being. The transition from being alive on the physical plane to the other side is best described as traveling from one room to another. You do not cease to exist or lose consciousness. Your awareness merely shifts from one point of view to another. Your perspective and feelings are altered as a result of the event, and the emotions I felt were profound. It most surely became the tranquility that exceeds all comprehension for me. My shift was gradual because I had a fatal disease, as opposed to a sudden one caused by accidents, heart attacks, or other causes. I became aware of a light being engulfing me. Everything was breathtakingly beautiful, so colorful and dazzling, and so full of life. Yes, life. In ways one would never see or experience on the physical world. I was entirely and utterly immersed in divine love. It was unconditional love in its purest form. I was continuously in communication with this light and was aware of its loving presence with me. As a result, there was no sensation of terror, and I was never alone. This was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to be one with the all, to never be separated, and never be at a loss. The colors were stunning as I watched the light twirl all about me, throbbing and dancing, producing whooshing sounds and being fun at moments, then serious at others. Many items would take on a brilliant light, a soft peach hue. Everything seemed extremely bright, even as I looked into deep space. I was constantly taken aback. Beautiful beings were always about me, assisting me, guiding me, reassuring me, and pouring love into me. I was never alone myself. The Life Review, which covered everything I had encountered in my physical incarnation up to that time, was one of the first things I remember experiencing. It seemed like I was at a movie theater, seeing a movie about my life and everything happening at the same time. Most NDEers, I believe, would agree that the Life Review is one of the most difficult components of the NDE. Viewing your entire existence in front of you, with every thought, speech, action, and so on, can be incredibly frightening. I appear to be uneasy and overly critical of myself. Having said that, I also realized that I was not speaking from the perspective of the ego self, but rather from the perspective of my soul self, which was much more detached and had no feelings of being emotionally charged or etc. I was no longer identifying with the bodily self's personality. As a result, what I felt was very different, coming from a completely different perspective as my true identity as the soul self. Even though I was no longer in my physical body, I had form, sort of a body. The simplest way to describe it is that I felt like a bubble, floating and flowing around effortlessly, sometimes very swiftly and sometimes simply drifting around. I felt hollow and clear inside, with the impression of a breeze blowing inside of me. There was never a feeling of hunger, thirst, exhaustion, or pain. In truth, such thoughts never occurred to me. Unfortunately, I was pure consciousness, embodied in a light and ethereal form, moving around or remaining quiet and studying closely, and always in wonder. It was a magnificent moment in which I felt such tranquility, a great sense of peace and constant faith. I also experienced no blindness, as I do with my legally blind physical eyes, and what a sense of astonishment and wonder it was to be able to see. At one point, I imagined myself on a guided tour, visiting and experiencing various places, creatures, and situations, some very delightful and some extremely sad. This tour was best described as being in a circular enclosure of windows, with each pane exposing something different. When I focused on a specific pane, it suddenly expanded to full size, much like a window in your computer display extending to full screen, and I stood still, just observing. One pane exhibited a scene that could be interpreted as hell or purgatory, with faceless, gray-colored beings moving aimlessly and muttering. They were obviously in a lot of pain and grief. I perceived these spirits as broken, as if they had perpetrated awful horrors in their lives. I've used the idea of a soul being retrograde, much like how a planet appears to be moving backwards. The overwhelming feeling I got while watching these individuals was one of tremendous compassion and a want to comfort them. I yearned to see them free of their agonizing torment. The preceding scene led to another, in which I saw images of people I knew in my current life. Everything experienced on the other side, once again, is always in the now, even the past and future. These were folks who had likewise perpetrated atrocities in some form or another. Those who had seriously harmed me or people I cared about. But the scene I witnessed was one in which they were made to suffer as a result of what they had done. This most likely being the karmic outcome of their decisions and deeds, etc. Again, I felt profound compassion for them and regret that they had to face such misery, but I also recognized that it was unavoidable. Never once did I feel resentment or contempt against these people. All I wanted was to see them cured, so they might experience love as well. Another scene that comes to me is finding myself in a realm made up of water. I saw all of its splendor and elegance, and it was teeming with life. Then, before I knew it, I was submerged in water and no longer had to worry about breathing. From the outside, I was moving around with ease and mingling with everything I had first noticed from the outside. When I traveled through space and danced and flowed with all the heavenly bodies and lights, the same thing happened to me. There were many opportunities for play and buzzing around with the light entities that whizzed around me like comets. This was an opportunity to experience enormous delight and to feel fully light and free of concern or fear. I could move with ease and adapt to any setting I happened to be in at the time. I'd just think about something and it'd appear. Or I'd think of a location and there I was. Oh, what a thrill it is to have such power. To go everywhere I wanted to be and make whatever I wanted. And to be so completely free. After the tour, the adventures, the periods of play and creation and so on, things grew more serious, and I was once again in direct connection with the being of light. I was now asked to help or assist in some way in the creation and determination of specific events, situations, or even things that affect others. How about me? Is it just me? Oh my goodness, I thought. That is a significant and grave duty. I was honored and humbled to be asked to participate in such a feat. But what if I didn't perform my part? I was curious. Then I was promised that everything would work out perfectly, even if I couldn't finish everything as planned. The idea of all of this seemed to be that we co-create with the light, and that we are also a part of the light. Furthermore, regardless of what happens, the light source will always be in control and there to see things through, despite any flaws on our side and souls. What a blessing it is, then, to recognize that we, as souls, are part of all creation and participate in its actual creative process. The concept of being invited to assist, to co-create with the light, made me feel profoundly special and significant in the grand scheme of things, but not in an arrogant way. As previously indicated, I felt profoundly humbled and a strong sense of responsibility for every thought and action I took. My sole thought was that I wanted to do the right thing. It was critical for me to be very kind and creative, and never to be destructive in any manner, and that is a gift. At that time, I realized how inextricably linked I am to all life, throughout all universes. I felt as though I were part of a whole, never distinct, never apart. Nonetheless, there was no dread. There was still only love. I could never be alone forever, because I would never be alone. It is impossible to be alone, because life is everywhere. Love is everywhere, and this is what has carried and will carry me. This encounter with the light was priceless to me. Everything was done telepathically, whether it was the light or other beings, friends or loved ones. It made no difference. It was always upfront, honest, and genuine. And it was always done with love. There's no such thing as putting on airs, and there's no reason to hide on the other side. No one is there to harm you in any way, not even in the slightest, because there's no sense of scarcity or the need to take someone else's power or vitality. You are acting as a soul, not as an ego or a personality. It's comforting to know that you'll have whatever you need because you have the capacity and the power to make it instantaneously. As the tone began to alter, I had the feeling that something serious was about to happen to me. I was now being told that I needed to return to the alien or physical planet that I had left behind because I was needed for something very exceptional and significant. I needed to return to communicate what had just happened to me and to show others that life is indeed eternal and death is merely an illusion. On a more personal level, I was advised that I needed to feel enormous love and joy in that realm before I could return home. I was then informed that I was real, and that I could trust what I had learned in this wonderful realm, not only about myself, but also about life. I was also taught that the world I was returning to was an illusion, and that I should not identify with it or become concerned with it, that I should be in it but not of it, and that I was only passing through. It would be an understatement to say that my heart fell. This was the first time I truly felt the pain of a broken heart while on the other side. The notion of leaving this sacred dimension where I was in daily connection with the light and other beings broke me in ways I cannot articulate. I realized how gloomy and foreboding that odd, illusory world to which I was being summoned was, and it is indeed a world with which I have never identified. However, I was told once more that the light and other loving beings would be with me at all times, and that I'd never been alone. Gratefully, there was no longer any fear, only sadness, but the realization that I had to obey the divine will in making this request of me. As I unwillingly agreed to this assignment, a most beautiful entity appeared in front of me, pouring immense love into me and filled me to overflowing. It was as if this was my reward for agreeing to leave my home on the other side and return to a world so foreign to me. This entity genuinely loved me and stayed with me, radiating love and music, and it was made plain that he would always be by my side. I began to return to this world in much the same way that I had left it. It was a slow and steady change. I was more conscious of my body laying in hospital intensive care, hooked up to a life support system, but it was still so distant from me and the perspective I was getting from the other side. When I finally regained awareness on this dimension, I felt like a newborn baby. Everything was strange and unfamiliar. I had just returned from another universe, literally, and this one seemed more darker and devoid of color in comparison. Everything seemed dull and flat to me. I didn't feel the life force that I had felt on the other side, but I was determined to fulfill the will of the light that I had been sent back to fulfill. I had a mission, and in exchange, I was given a special promise. Even while in the hospital, I was aware that the being of light was still present and speaking with me. I was also aware of other beings around me, beings that I subsequently realized only I could see and hear. Finally, the being of light vanished from the view of my mortal awareness, and I realized I was truly back in this planet. Again, I was heartbroken, but fearless, believing and trusting in the promise that I would never be alone. And so it was.